Welcome to Exodus Music Theory. This is part one of several parts. This part is going to cover intervals and scales. If you'd like to see the rest of the presentations in the series and maybe some other additional materials, you can scan the QR code here or visit the short URL below. For those of you who have dealt with music for any period of time at all, a lot of this material is going to be remedial. So just keep in mind that as worship teams, we're really working to worship Jesus and helping others to do the same and to play our instruments with excellence so that we glorify Jesus. And theory is just a means to that end. So again, this is going to be review material for a lot of you. But the material builds on itself. So as you get to the end of this, the things in the beginning that seem really boring are really fundamental to understanding the stuff that we're going to cover later on. We're going to use a variety of different tools to help understand the intervals or positions in the scale. You don't have to understand them all, but a lot of them you may already know. So we'll use things like common songs that you've heard before. We'll look at the way things look on a piano keyboard or how they look on a guitar neck, or we'll use solfege, which is the syllables, like you've heard in The Sound of Music, do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do, to talk about the intervals. On a piano keyboard, and a piano keyboard would actually be really helpful for this if you wanted to hack out some of the things to hear how they sound. So you don't have to know how to play piano, but it would be really helpful if you can just find your way between different keys and things like that on a piano keyboard. And then it also helps to visualize things. So this is what a piano keyboard looks like. The white keys are the natural keys, so they have names that go from A to G, but we typically start and end with C. So the piano, it just repeats itself, so you go from C to B, and then we start all over again at C. The black keys in between, if you think of the black key as one up from a white key or one to the right of a white key, then it's called the white key's name plus sharp. So the key to the right of C is C sharp. The key to the right of F is F sharp. If you think to the left, then it's flat. So to the left of G is G flat. You'll notice that F sharp and G flat are the same key. So there are two different names for each of the black keys. And it depends on what key you're playing in or which way you're thinking. Guitarists tend to think in terms of sharps, and a lot of wind instrument players tend to think in terms of flats. And then pianists will probably think have to be able to think in both directions. On a guitar neck, each string has a different open pitch, and then each fret, the lines in the vertical lines that separate the notes on the string, each one is a half step higher than the previous one. There are typically dots on a guitar neck. Those dots happen at the 3rd fret, the 5th fret, the 7th fret, the 9th fret, and then on the 12th fret there will generally be 2 dots, and that's 12 half steps is an octave. So if this is the E key, or if the lowest string is the E, 1 fret up would be F, F sharp, G, G sharp, A sharp, B, C, C sharp, D, D sharp, and then back to E. So we started on E. The 12th fret is the same note, just an octave higher. In solfege, you can think of the notes. This is not lettered notes, but this is the degree in the scale. So the first note in the scale is do. The second note in the scale is re. The second note in the scale is mi. The fourth the third is mi, the fourth is fa, the fifth is sol, the sixth is la, the seventh is ti, and the eighth is do. There are hand signs there. You may have used hand signs if you were in choir in a younger grade or in an ear training class. The hand signs are definitely not necessary for the classes here, but if you do think in terms of hand signs, those are available to you and can help during your ear training if you're really interested in learning them. The major scale, we're going to kind of skip over intervals for a minute and talk about the major scale so that we can learn at least one of these tools, solfege, to talk about the distances between notes. The major scale, again, do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. On a keyboard, the C major scale, be do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. If you wanted to think of the major scale as two tetrads or four-note sequences, those tetrads are the same or have the same pattern to them. They're four-note sequences and they're separated by one whole step. So each tetrad is made up of a whole step, and a half step. So in the C major scale that we just played, C to D is a whole step, D to E is a whole step, and then E to F is a half step. And then the second tetrad begins on G. G to A is a whole step, A to B is a whole step, B to C is a half step, and then from F to G is a whole step. So you've got whole step, half step, whole step, whole step, whole step, half step. And even if you play a major scale in a different key, that interval of whole step, half step, whole step, half step is going to be exactly the same. So the E flat major scale, E flat to F is a whole step, F to G is a whole step, G to A flat is a half step, whole, half. So the C major scale, there you go, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. There's a half step between E and F and a half step between B and C. If you wanted to memorize the pattern, it's whole step, half step, whole step, half step. Looking at that on a sheet of music, this is the C major scale. Looking at the hand signs, so from do to re is a whole step, re to mi is a whole step, mi to fa is a half step, fa to sol is a whole step, sol to la is a whole step, la to ti is a whole step, and then ti to do is a half step. And then you've got key signatures. The key signatures help you to understand which notes are always going to be sharp or which notes are always going to be flat in a key within a given key. So if you go up a fifth from C, you add a sharp in each on the seventh of each scale after that. So C has no sharps and no flats. A fifth up from C is G, and so you sharp the note before the G, so F sharp. A fifth up from G is D, and so in addition to F sharp, you're going to have a C sharp. The seventh note ends up getting a sharp. And so these are the key signatures for all of the keys that you would generally talk about having sharps. So G has one sharp, it's F sharp. D has two sharps, it's F sharp and C sharp. A has three sharps, F sharp, C sharp, and G sharp. E has four sharps, F sharp, C sharp, G sharp, and D sharp. B has five, F, C, G, D, and A. And then F sharp, it's a really weird key, but there are 6 sharps in that. F sharp, C sharp, G sharp, D sharp, and A sharp, and E sharp. And yes, E sharp is the same note on the piano. If you look at this at the piano here, there's E, there is no E sharp. E sharp is the same key as F, is the same key on the keyboard as F. But if you're talking about the key of F sharp, then that's actually spelled E sharp, not F. Music is weird that way. As you go down a fifth from C, you add a flat to the key on the 4th of the scale. So a fifth down from C is F. The fourth up from F is B flat. A fifth down from B flat is E flat, and the fourth of that is A flat. And we won't talk much about flats because most people viewing this are going to be guitarists, and so they end up dealing more with sharps than with flats. We're going to go through all of the 12 intervals that we can go through here, and on each one of them we'll talk about the name of the interval. Some intervals have multiple names, and so it's useful to know all of those names so that if somebody uses a different name in rehearsal than you're used to hearing, you can still make the translation to what it is you know. What are some of the characteristics of that interval? Is it a happy sound, a sad sound? Is it dissonant or resonant? How do you find that interval generally on a piano? How do you find that interval generally on a guitar? We'll talk about the 2 solfege syllables that you can use to make that interval. Then we'll talk about how many half steps there are to make the interval. And then you can use songs. Most of these intervals can be covered by at least some part of a song that you probably already know. And then we'll probably glaze over it, but there is a mathematical reason for the intervals, and so we'll talk about the math, or we'll just introduce the math there. And then one of the more important ones that we'll talk about is the inverse. So if you move the bottom note of an interval up to the top, so if we're talking about the interval from F to C, for example, that's a perfect fifth. If you invert that interval, that's C up to an F, and that's a perfect fourth. And so we'll talk about the inverse of intervals as well. And understanding inverses is pretty important too. The first one we'll talk about is very easy. It's a perfect unison. It's basically the same note. So if you don't change notes, then the 2 notes in a row are considered to be a perfect unison. Or if 2 people are singing the same note at the same time, it's a perfect unison. That sound is resonant or pleasing or maybe boring. You don't get any indication of what kind of a key it is or anything like that by just listening to it. It's the same note on a piano, or if you play the same fret and same string on a guitar, then it's the same fret and same string. In solfege, do to do is a perfect unison, re to re, or mi to mi, or fa to fa. It's 0 half steps. Again, it's the very same note. So the first 2 notes in I surrender, all to thee, I surrender, all to, are a perfect unison. The math of it, if you were, it's a 1-to-1 ratio. Again, it's the same note, or in equal temperament, the unison is up 2 to the 0/12th power, or 2 times, 1 times 0/12th roots of 2. And it's the perfect octave is the inverse. So if we've got a C on the bottom and a C on the top, if we move the bottom note up an octave, so that C, the inverse of this is this. The next interval is a minor second. There are many names that you may hear for this: minor second, or a half step, or a semitone. The two notes together are very dissonant. So, or, um, or, okay, the two notes together are very dissonant. This is one of the most dissonant sounds that you can have when the notes are played together, but they're useful in making chord changes. So from the 5 chord to the 1 chord. Jumping ahead a little bit. It's any two adjacent keys on the keyboard, so a white key to its neighbor black key, or if you think, or between E and F, there is no black key, so those two are a half step apart, and then from B to C, there is no black key in between. There are two places in solfege where that happens: mi to fa, do re mi fa, and then ti up to do. So do re mi fa sol la ti do. On a guitar, it's any two adjacent frets on the same string. In number of half steps, it's one half step. Again, another name for it is half step. In Jesus Only Jesus, Holy King Almighty. Holy King Almighty Lord. Okay. 16/15 is the harmonic, or 2 to the 1/12 power in equal temperament. And the inverse of that is a major seventh. So if A or C to C sharp is a minor second or a half step, the inverse of that is going to be from C sharp up to C. And those two together are still very dissonant. A major second is also called a full step or a tone. So if a half step is a semitone, a full step is a tone. They're somewhat dissonant together, but the inverse ends up in a lot of the inverse of that, which is a minor seventh, actually ends up in a lot of chords that you'll see a lot of times. For example, a dominant seventh chord has a minor seventh in it, which is the inverse of a major second. To find it on a keyboard, it's any two adjacent white keys or two adjacent black keys. The sound of that is... And then the weird ones to think about are, for example, D sharp to F, or E to F sharp. So they're somewhat dissonant together, but not terribly so. On a guitar, if you skip 2 frets and stay on the same string, then that gives you a major second. There are a lot of major seconds in solfege. Remember, we talked about the major scale being whole step, half step, whole step, whole step, whole step, half step. And so do to re, re to mi, fa to sol, sol to la, and la to ti are all whole steps. A whole step, again, is 2 half steps. And in Jesus Only Jesus, the last Jesus is a whole step apart. In harmonic intervals, it's a 9/8 ratio, or in equal temperament, it's 2 12th roots of 2, or 2 times the 12th root of 2. The inverse of that is a minor seventh. So a major second, C to D, but D to C, D up to C is the inverse. That's a major second, minor seventh. Next interval is a minor third. A minor third is pleasing. It's the root of a minor chord. It's really difficult to sing well without some sort of help, but it's actually the first interval that you ever learn. When you learn to call for mommy, it's a minor third. So, and doorbells are also often done in a minor third. So F down to D is a minor third. B flat to G is a minor third. So if you think of mommy or ding dong, that kind of helps you with the minor third. But it's very difficult to think of the other way, but it's the very first interval that you ever learn. So some examples would be C sharp to E or E to G, F sharp to A or A to C. If you skip 3 frets and stay on the same string, or if you go from the E string up to an A string and down 2 frets on that, that's a minor third on a guitar. There are 3 places in solfege where you might see a minor third, from Re up to Fa, or Mi up to Sol, or La up to Do. Those are all minor thirds. A minor third is made up of 3 half steps. If you think of mommy or doorbell, those are minor thirds, or the second to third holy in Holy, Holy, Holy. So that's a minor third. The math of it, the harmonic is 6/5, and it's 3 12th roots of 2 in equal temperament. The inverse of a minor third is a major 6. So C, or let's do D to F. The inverse of that is F up to D. And that's a major 6. The inverse of a minor is a major. The inverse of a major is a minor, and the inverse of a perfect is another perfect. A major third is also very pleasing. They're resonant together. It's the root of a major chord. So some examples would be from C to E, E to G sharp, G sharp to C, G sharp, pardon me, G sharp to, or A flat to C, and C to E. On a guitar, if you skip up 4 frets, so from an empty or an open string to between the 3rd and the 5th, or between the 1st and 2nd dots, so that's a major third. The places where a major third can be found in the major scale are Do to Mi, or Fa up to La, or Sol up to T. That a major third is made up of 4 half steps. The first 2 holies in Holy, Holy, Holy. So that's a major third. The math, it's a 5/4 harmonic, or the 4 12th roots of 2. Again, the inverse of a major is a minor, so the inverse of a major 6 is the inverse of a major third is a minor 6. So if C to E flat, or C to E is a major third, then the inverse of that is going to be E to C, and that's a minor 6th. The next interval is a perfect 4th. The sound of it is it's resonant, but it's ambiguous tonally. You can't tell whether this is a major chord or a minor chord. But that interval is in melodies is used quite a lot. This is sol to do, or going from the 5 chord to 1 chord. Examples would be C to F or C sharp to F sharp, F to B flat, or G up to C. A perfect fourth. This is how far apart the strings are in normal tuning on a bass guitar. So the E string to the A string is a perfect fourth. The A string to a D string, or the D string to the G string, is a perfect fourth. On a 6-string guitar, the E to the A to the D to the G, and then the top two or the highest 2 strings from B back up to E is a perfect fourth. The places where this happens in a major scale are sol to do, sol up to do, do up to fa, re up to sol, or mi up to la. This is 5 steps, 5 half steps. On Christ the Solid Rock I Stand. All other got to think of what a perfect fourth up from E is A. The math of it, it's a 4/3 harmonic, and it's 5 12th roots of 2. The inverse of a perfect fourth, so C up to F, the inverse is a perfect fifth, F to C. You can hear, when you hear them together, that it's very difficult to tell, is this going to be a major chord, or is this going to be a minor chord? The next interval is a tritone. There are lots of different names for a tritone. An augmented fourth or a diminished fifth. How could it be a fourth and a fifth? Well, it depends on how it's spelled. And again, musicians are weird. If you spell, the chords can be spelled, some chords can be spelled multiple ways, and depending on how the interval is spelled, it would be considered an augmented fourth in one way, and a diminished fifth in the other. Another name for the tritone is Diabolos and Musica. That is Latin for devil in the music. It was an interval that was that very long ago had historically been avoided because it is so dissonant. It was considered devil in the music, and so you didn't use it at all. That interval is very dissonant, but it's useful in dominant seventh chords. So from F to B is very dissonant, but it resolves either that way or so that interval is used in a lot of chords, and it resolves and makes a lot of sense when it's used with other notes in the chord. The inverse in a tritone to a tritone is another tritone. So the inverse of an augmented fourth. So F to B is an augmented fourth. F to B flat would be a perfect fourth. So if you augment the flat in B flat, you get B. So F to B is a augmented fourth. From B up to F is the inverse of that. B up to F is an augmented or a diminished fifth. That is Fa up to T or T up to Fa. So the inverse of a tritone is another tritone. The next interval is a perfect fifth. Again, just like the perfect fourth, it's ambiguous tonally, so you can't tell whether this is a major chord or a minor chord if you only have the fourth or a fifth. But 1 to 5 is common. and 4 up to 1 is pretty common. Some intervals that make it, or some examples are C to G, or B flat to F, or F to C. On a guitar, if you go from the first string to the second, or I'm sorry, the sixth string to the fifth string, up to frets, then that is a perfect fifth. Do to sol, re to la, mi up to ti, or fa up to do are perfect fifths. It's 7 half steps, so the 7th fret on a guitar, if you go from an open string up to the 7th fret, that's also a perfect fifth. In the alphabet song, from A, B to C, D, or Twinkle Twinkle in Twinkle Twinkle Little Star is a perfect fifth. The harmonic values for that is 3 halves, or 7 12th roots of 2 in equal temperament. Those two values are close, but they're not exactly the same. And then a perfect fourth is the inverse. So the inverse of C to G is G up to C, which is a perfect fourth. Next interval is a minor 6. We've already talked a little bit about the minor 6 because we talked about the major third, which is its inverse. It has a major sound because this is the first inversion of a minor chord. So if C to E is a, C to E is a major third, then the minor 6 would be E to G, E up to C. On a piano, again, E up to C or G up to E flat, for example. On a guitar, you're gonna, if you go from the 6th string up to the 5th string and 3 more frets, or if you go from an open string up to the 8th fret, or 1st fret to the 9th fret, something like that. Mi going up to do, or la up to fa, or ti up to sol. Those are all minor 6ths. It's 8 half steps. In We Are Young by Fun, so we set the world on fire, is a minor 6th. In math, the harmonic is about an 8 fifths, or in equal temperament, it's 8 12th roots of 2. Those are about as close as you get. A major third is the inverse of that. The next interval is a major 6, or 9 half steps. It is the inverse of a minor third. Again, it's got a minor sound because it's the inverse of a minor third. So if C up to E flat is a minor third, then a major 6 is going to be E flat up to C. On a piano, E flat up to C is a major 6, or E up to a C sharp. On a guitar, the 6th string up to the D string, or skip 2 strings and go down 1 fret. So if you were on the 1st fret of the E string, so an F, and you go up to the D open, then that's a major 6. The places where this happens in solfege are do going up to la, so the first note up to the 6th note, re up to ti, the 2nd note up to the 7th, fa up to re, so the 4th note all the way up to the 2nd note up an octave, and then sol up to mi. It's made up of 9 half steps. In It Came Upon a Midnight Clear, It Came is a major 6. The harmonic ratio, the closest is about 5 thirds. In equal temperament, that's 9 12th roots of 2. Again, the inverse of a major 6 is a minor third. Next interval is a minor 7th. We've talked about it already, or its inverse already. Again, it's slightly dissonant, just like the major second is. But you hear it in dominant seventh chords, so major, minor, minor seventh chords, have a minor seventh in them. C up to B flat or D up to C on the piano would be examples of a minor seventh. On a guitar, if you go up 10 frets or you go up two strings, just up two strings, from the sixth string to the fourth or the fifth to the third, for example. Re going all the way up to Do, or Mi going all the way up to Re, or Sol going all the way up to Fa. Those are all examples of minor sevenths. It's 10 half steps. In the song Somewhere from West Side Story, which very few people know anymore, there's a place for us, a time and space for us. There's is a minor seventh. The harmonic equivalent is 16 ninths, and then in equal temperament, that's 10 12th roots of 2. Again, the inverse of a minor seventh is a major second. So if C to D is a major second, D up to C is a minor seventh. Next interval is a major seventh. Again, this is we've already covered it in as its inverse, which is a minor second. This is 11 half steps. It's very dissonant together. It's two adjacent notes, but turn them upside down. So B to C are adjacent, but if you go from C to B, up to B, then that makes your major seventh. If you go up 11 frets or up two strings in one fret on the first four strings on the guitar, Do to T and Fa to Mi are the major sevenths. And Somewhere Over the Rainbow, if you go from somewhere O, is a major seventh. 11 twelfths, or 2 to the 11 twelfths, or 11 12th roots of 2 is the equal temperament value for a major seventh. So C to C sharp is a minor second. The inverse is a major seventh. And then the last interval that we'll cover is the perfect octave. This is the inverse of the perfect unison. It's very resonant. It's the same note except up an octave, or in Somewhere Over the Rainbow, somewhere. Oops. And those are all the intervals. So in this we have covered the intervals that make up the major scale, and we have covered the 12 intervals that are used within that scale. And that again is very boring, maybe very boring material. Training your ear to being able to hear those is pretty important to some of the remainder stuff that we're going to cover, though.